another one.
So, is it normal to work without test management slash reporting tools in a proper agile team? In my current and previous projects, we basically had this pretty standard workflow. Unit test slash component test, part of the CI build, API to end-to-end test, also in CI, another pipeline. And just in case you don't know, CI is continuous integration. All right. And stories slash tasks are being manually tested within the sprint as they come up. But testing just happens based on the acceptance criteria. No test cases written out in detail, just a summary and the stories themselves. Any sort of regression test not covered by automation was simply documented in a wiki, as this was fairly limited. So I'm trying to explain to testers of our other teams they don't really need to use a test management tool. Why? There is no legal or other external reason to log results of test runs. With daily deploys for all kinds of microservices, the code is the truth, unlike my first project's waterfall, where a test manager would need progress on the quarterly software releases. Some people can be very long winded, I must add. But in case of a defect, the whole team is accountable and responsible to fix this, regardless of who would have tested it. Automated test results are automatically logged in the CI for a month or so. If new automated tests need to be written, you do it as part of the story so you don't need to trace to separate test cases. Automated tests are self documenting. After writing out tests and executing them, once the feature is live, in my experience, no one ever looks back at these tests and it consumes time to write them. Exception being very complex data heavy scenarios, but they are rare and documented separately. Am I missing some important reason why testers on such teams should use test plans, X ray, or any other test management tool? All right. So let's get to it. All right. So I I understand what this person is saying, right? And for the most part, it very similar to the process that I use in in on my team in my role. But but I do still have to mostly disagree with what they're saying, right? Um and why is that? So I will describe it I'll describe it in I have a couple of examples, right? I'll use my current role and I'll use a previous company that I worked for. Um So in my current role, we do not have an official test case management tool, right? We use like Google Docs and stuff like that to document our tests, but we don't necessarily write like specific, like very detailed steps out, right? In our test plan, we because we generally understand we understand the project and the process, but we do write out the test plan on what we actually want to validate, and we store that like on a Google Drive, right? So, and as far as the unit test, component test, they are inside of the code base, and the developers manage that, right? The API and end-to-end test, they are in another pipeline. Okay. But now here's like here's the part that I disagree with. And about that, it's come back to bite me a few times, right? Well, it actually didn't bite me because I was prepared because I thought ahead. So what was the situation, right? Having my test cases documented and having the test run results, even when we didn't expect any type of legal thing, but when a legal thing did come up, we were able to provide the test cases and have the test runs, whether they were done manually or through automation, we had them logged, right? And that pretty much saved us a lot of money and a lot of headache, right? Because you never know what the future might hold, right? So that's one reason that I found it very beneficial. The other thing is I used the test cases that were in the test case management system for training purposes. When I would have to onboard a new QA, I could easily say, like, give them the basic instructions around, but I could also easily say, hey, go run these test cases so you can get familiar with the application that we're using. You can navigate through it. If you have any questions, let me know, all that stuff, right? And I found that also very helpful. Another thing is working with like now working with a company with a huge QA team where other teams might have to go into our domain and maybe they're updating something or they need to run some tests on something that we might own, right? I'm able to direct them to and just the other day they were asking like, hey, do you have any tests around this? And I was able to guide them to our test plan on things to look for, things to validate, what we validated in the past, all of that, right? So that came in also very useful, right? I am just a fan of having documentation of the of what we're working on. It holds us accountable. It shows that what we worked on, the whole like the idea. I agree with the premise of if something is wrong, it's the whole team's responsibility. But I also like documentation so that we can know what like to go like if we have to go back and look at something, we can say, okay, this is what we did, this is what we missed, and we're able to do a debrief on it and things like that. Um, I know that it's always been very, very helpful to be able to have this documentation. And another thing that has helped me with when we had a technical writer, because we're going to turn our service into a sellable product, I was able to provide the API documentation, the test cases to our technical writer in order to so they could build the documentation for our software, right? So in many, many different cases, these have come to be a benefit to us. And as far as the automation, um, I try to automate as much as possible that we need to run on a regular basis. That's within reason. But what something that I being that we use like a BDD in Python we use behave, right? That documentation, the feature files is our test cases, right? So I can easily say, hey, go check out this test case, go check out these feature files, and that'll be your test cases as well. So documentation in many different ways. But I like maybe it's paranoid from things I've seen in the past, but documentation is absolutely essential to having successful product releases, to onboarding people, all of this good stuff. So if whatever the logging mechanism is, I don't think that because here's the thing. You say there is no legal or external reasons to log results of test runs right now, right? Right now. But you never know what can come up. You never know. And when you don't have it and something comes up, now you're in trouble, right? So I'm always a fan of preparing in advance because you don't know what the future might hold. And here's the thing, you might have those sentiments now, but I've been the hero on multiple occasions by having documentation of our processes, of what we tested. We're able to provide to, create reports, print out test cases, print out test runs, all that stuff has worked to my benefit on multiple occasions. So I would like, I can't get on board with that thought because you don't know the liability and risk that you might be putting your company in, and you could end up saving them from tons and tons of trouble if, as a QA engineer, you also take into consideration all of those risk factors as well. I think you're avoiding the risk, and I think as QA engineers, you also have to be risk adverse and prepare for things that we might not even expect to come. But preparation is the key. All right. So shout out to that question.
If you enjoyed the fascinating information shared in this video and you want more, be sure to hit the subscribe button to Tech Coach Ralph to be notified for new videos.